My name is Alexandra Reed, and the day I found out my parents had given my house away, I was standing in the driveway holding a grocery bag that tore at the bottom. I hadn't been home in months. Work had been heavy, life louder than usual. I came back expecting a quiet weekend, maybe a hug, maybe coffee at the kitchen table. Instead, I walked into a scene that didn't include me at all. A realtor's car was parked where I always left mine. The front door was wide open. Inside, my younger sister Megan, the golden child, was laughing, barefoot on the hardwood floors I paid to refinish. My mother was pointing at the windows, talking about natural light. My father nodded along, hands folded like this was already settled business. I stood there long enough for the realtor to notice me. She smiled politely and asked, "Are you family?" Before I could answer, Megan did. "Oh, she doesn't live here," she said, waving a hand. "This house is being transferred to me. Quote, to make self. Transferred. Like a library book. Like furniture." My mother finally looked at me. "We meant to tell you," she said, carefully. "You're doing well. You don't need this house the way Megan does." The words landed softly, but they cut clean. No one asked me a single question. Not about paperwork. Not about ownership. Not about whether I agreed. They spoke as if the decision had always belonged to them. As if I'd already stepped aside. The realtor flipped through her folder. "We'll just need the owner's confirmation," she said. Silence followed. A thick, confident silence. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even set the groceries down. I smiled, once, and said the only thing that mattered. "My lawyers will explain." And that was the moment the room began to shift, whether they realized it yet or not. I wasn't surprised by what they did. That was the part that hurt the most. I'd spent my whole life being the easy one. The child who didn't cry loudly, didn't demand attention, didn't need rescuing. While Megan was celebrated for every small achievement, I was praised for being independent. That word followed me like a compliment that slowly turned into an excuse. "She'll figure it out," my parents used to say about me. "She always does." And I did. I paid my way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs while Megan changed majors twice without consequences. I moved out early, learned how to budget, learned how to be quiet about stress. When I bought the house, I didn't throw a party or post pictures. I just signed the papers and went back to work the next day. That became my mistake. Because, in my family, visibility mattered more than effort. Neediness earned protection. Silence looked like surplus. Megan struggled loudly. She needed help loudly. She failed loudly. And every time she did, my parents stepped in financially, emotionally, endlessly. When she lost a job, they paid her rent. When her relationships fell apart, they blamed everyone else. When she talked about needing stability, they nodded like that settled everything. I, on the other hand, never asked. So when I offered to let our parents live in my house after Dad's health scare, they saw it as generosity, not ownership. When I covered repairs and property taxes quietly, they saw it as convenience. Over time, the lines blurred in their minds. The house stopped being Alexandra's house. It became the family house. And once it was framed that way, they felt entitled to redistribute it. They told themselves a story where Megan needed it more, and I wouldn't mind. That I'd understand. That I'd step aside, like I always had. That I'd absorb the loss the way I absorbed everything else, silently, responsibly, without making it uncomfortable. What they never realized was this. Being easy doesn't mean being powerless. It just means people forget to ask how far they're allowed to go. And they had gone very far without ever once checking where the ground actually ended. I bought the house 8 years earlier, on a gray Tuesday morning that didn't feel important enough to mark. There were no balloons, no congratulations, no family photos in front of the door. I signed the papers alone, shook the realtor's hand, and went back to the office by noon. That was how most of my milestones happened, quietly. The house wasn't extravagant. 2 stories, an aging roof, hardwood floors hidden under old carpet, a backyard that needed more imagination than money. But it was mine. My name was the only one on the deed. I made sure of that. When my parents needed a place to stay after Dad's heart scare, it felt natural to offer it. They were still working, still independent, and they promised it would be temporary. I never drew up a lease. I never asked for rent. Family didn't require contracts, or so I believed back then. Over the years, I paid for the repairs myself. The roof replacement. The plumbing issue that flooded the downstairs bathroom. The property taxes that arrived like clockwork every year. I never complained, never asked for reimbursement. When something broke, I fixed it. When something needed upgrading, I handled it. No one questioned where the money came from. No one asked whose name was on the insurance policy, or who signed the checks, or who the county records listed as the owner. Those details were invisible because I made them invisible. I handled them the same way I handled everything else, quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. Somewhere along the way, my parents stopped seeing themselves as guests. They started rearranging furniture, repainting rooms, talking about our house to neighbors. I let it slide. Correcting them felt petty. Unnecessary. I didn't want to be the person who pulled rank over family. And that silence rewrote the narrative. By the time Megan started hinting that she needed a place of her own, the assumption was already set. In their minds, the house wasn't something I had built, paid for, and protected. It was a shared resource. A family asset. Something they could hand over with good intentions and zero permission. They never asked about the house because they never imagined the answer could stop them. That assumption, more than anything, was the most expensive mistake they made. Once the idea took root in their minds, everything moved faster than I expected. Megan didn't ask if she could have the house. She talked about it as if it had already been decided. At first, it came in fragments, offhand comments during family calls, little hints dropped with practiced innocence. "When I move in," she said once, laughing, "I'll finally repaint the living room." That beige is depressing. I remember pausing, phone pressed to my ear, waiting for anyone to correct her. No one did. My parents filled in the rest. They talked about timelines, about how nice it would be for Megan to have stability close to them. They spoke as if the logistics were minor details that would sort themselves out. Paperwork. Formalities. Nothing worth slowing down for. Then they went further. My mother told the neighbors Megan would be taking over the house. My father mentioned, casually, that they were getting things ready for a transfer. No one ever looped me in. I heard about these conversations secondhand, through comments and assumptions that drifted back to me like rumors. The boldest step came when they called a realtor. I didn't find out directly. A family friend mentioned seeing a listing photographer near the house. Another neighbor congratulated my parents on helping their younger daughter out. Each piece of information felt unreal on its own. Together, they formed a picture I couldn't ignore. They weren't testing an idea anymore. They were executing a plan. What stunned me wasn't just the entitlement, it was the confidence. They truly believed there would be no resistance. That I would nod, smile, and step aside the way I always had. That my silence in the past meant consent in the present. They never considered that I might object. Or that I had the right to. Or that the house was legally, unquestionably mine. Because in their version of the story, I was still the easy one. The reliable one. The one who didn't complicate things. So they went as far as people do when they think the ground beneath them is solid without checking whether it actually belonged to them. And by the time they realized how far they'd gone, there was already a realtor involved, plans in motion, and an assumption so large it blinded them to the truth waiting underneath. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning, as if that made it less serious. As if choosing the weekend softened the fact that they were about to give away something that wasn't theirs. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat in my car across the street, watching through the windshield. The realtor's sedan pulled up first. Megan followed, energetic and confident, carrying herself like someone already rehearsing her victory speech. My parents came out behind her, smiling, relaxed, proud even. No one looked nervous. That told me everything. Inside, the house felt different, staged. Almost. Papers were spread neatly across the dining table. The realtor introduced herself, warm and professional, assuming familiarity. She shook my parents' hands, then Megan's. When she turned to me, there was a brief pause. "And you are?" she asked politely. "My daughter," my mother said quickly. "She's just visiting." "Just visiting." Megan jumped in without missing a beat. "We're finalizing things today," she said, tapping the folder. "My parents are transferring the property to me." I'll be moving in soon. The realtor nodded, pen poised. Wonderful. We'll just need to confirm ownership and signatures so we can proceed. That was the moment, the exact second where everything could have stopped. One question, answered honestly, would have ended the entire performance. But no one corrected the narrative. My father cleared his throat and said something vague about paperwork being handled. My mother smiled too tightly. Megan leaned back in her chair, already planning renovations out loud. The realtor flipped through documents, then looked up again. So just to be clear, who is the legal owner of the property? Silence fell over the table, heavier this time. Not confusion. Not doubt. Just the expectation that the answer would magically align with their intentions. They all looked at me. It wasn't accusatory. It was expectant. Like they were waiting for me to do what I always did: smooth it over. Make it easier, say yes without forcing anyone to confront discomfort. I felt oddly calm. Detached. As if I were watching this happen to someone else. I won't be explaining, I said evenly. My lawyers will. The realtor blinked. Megan laughed, sharp and dismissive. Lawyers? That's dramatic. I didn't respond. Because in that moment, the meeting stopped being about family assumptions and started becoming what it always should have been: about facts. And facts don't care how confident you sound when you've already gone too far. The knock on the door was soft, almost polite. Not dramatic. Not urgent. But it changed everything. I stood and opened it myself. Two people stepped inside, calm and unhurried, carrying slim briefcases instead of raised voices. My lawyers. They didn't look around in awe or confusion. They didn't ask who anyone was. They walked in like people who already knew exactly where they stood. Good morning, one of them said, setting a folder on the dining table. We're here regarding the property transfer. The realtor straightened immediately. Her posture shifted from casual to alert. She glanced at my parents, then at Megan, then back at the documents being laid out in front of her. My mother laughed nervously. I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a family matter. One of my lawyers smiled politely. That's what people usually say when legal ownership is involved. He opened the folder and slid a single document across the table. The deed. My name sat at the top in clear black print. No joint ownership, no asterisks, no ambiguity. The purchase date, 8 years ago. The county seal. The signature. Silence spread fast and absolute. The realtor leaned forward, reading carefully. Her face drained of color, not dramatically, just enough to tell me she understood immediately what this meant. Megan scoffed. That doesn't mean anything. Our parents live here. My second lawyer spoke then, her voice calm but sharp. Occupancy does not equal ownership. Financial contribution does not equal ownership. An intention does not override recorded title. She placed another document down. Property tax records. Insurance policies. Repair invoices, all paid by me. This property, she said, looking directly at the realtor now, was never theirs to give. The room felt smaller, heavier. My father finally spoke. We didn't know it worked like that. My lawyer nodded once. That's common. But the law doesn't operate on assumptions. The realtor closed her folder slowly. I can't proceed with any transfer or listing, she said carefully. Not without the owner's authorization. She looked at me. Not my parents. Not Megan. Me? Megan's confidence cracked instantly. Alexandra, come on. You wouldn't actually stop this. I didn't answer her. Because this moment wasn't about punishment. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. The story they'd been telling themselves, the one where my silence meant surrender, collapsed under the weight of facts they never bothered to ask for. And for the first time in that house, no one was speaking over me. They were finally listening. The room didn't explode the way I thought it might. It collapsed inward. My mother was the first to speak, her voice thin and trembling. We were only trying to help Megan, she said, as if intention could undo fact. My father stared at the table, rubbing his temples, repeating, we didn't know, like a prayer that might absolve him. Megan wasn't quiet for long. This is unbelievable, she snapped, turning on me. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You let lawyers come in like we're criminals. I watched the blame shift in real time, away from decisions. Away from entitlement. away from the truth and land exactly where it always had, on me. The realtor stood up, already gathering her things. I'm removing myself from this situation, she said carefully. Any further action would require direct authorization from the legal owner. She didn't wait for a response. When the door closed behind her, the house felt exposed. Unprotected. That's when the apologies came. Not clean ones. Not real ones. My parents asked me to reconsider. Megan demanded I be reasonable. Someone mentioned family. Someone mentioned forgiveness. No one mentioned accountability. So I did the only thing left to do. I told them all financial support would end immediately. No more repairs. No more coverage. No more assumptions. The house would be vacated on my timeline, under proper legal notice. The silence that followed wasn't angry, it was stunned. They had mistaken my patience for permission, and now, faced with consequences instead of compliance, they finally understood something they never expected to learn from me. Being quiet doesn't mean you won't draw a line. I didn't stay to argue. There was nothing left to explain. I left the house that afternoon with the same calm I'd walked in with, only now it felt earned. For years, I thought strength had to be loud to be respected, that if I didn't protest, I'd disappear. I was wrong. Silence isn't absence. Silence is control when it's chosen. My parents had confused my restraint with surrender. Megan had mistaken my independence for indifference. They all believed I would keep absorbing the cost of their comfort simply because I always had. What they learned too late was that boundaries don't need speeches. They need enforcement. The law didn't care who was favored. The deed didn't care who needed more. And I didn't need to raise my voice to be heard. Walking away, I realized something simple and final. Quiet power lasts longer than permission ever does. Before you leave, I want to talk to you as Alexandra, not just a character in a story. If you believe I did the right thing, please tell me in the comments. I want to know what you would have done in my place. Would you have stayed silent? Would you have spoken up sooner? Your perspective matters more than you think, and someone reading your comment might need it today. Here's what I learned, and what I hope you take into your own life. Being kind does not mean being unprotected. Family does not get unlimited access to your time, money, or boundaries just because of blood. Document what you own. Know your rights. And never confuse guilt with responsibility. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Quiet strength deserves a voice, and together, we give it one.